Joy to the world, the Lord has come.
Well, good morning, church. Good morning. I'm so glad all of you are here today. We only have 10 more days until Christmas. Who's ready? That's what I thought. Yeah. If you're anything like me, you may have another present or two to buy. You got boxes to wrap. There's lots of things to do as we kind of get ready for the big day. And if your family is anything like our family, there's lots of other things that we're looking forward to doing. You know, we want to go take a drive and see the Christmas lights. We've got traditions that we love to do. We got cookies to bake and other goodies to make. There's just lots of things, you know, movies to watch, just all the things that kind of go with the Christmas season. And you know, as you begin to think about just all that happens, you know, right here in this time of year, it may not just be the happiest, you know, time of year. It may be the busiest time of the year. There's so many things to do and so many things to get done. It makes me wonder, when was the last time you took time to be still? When was the last time you intentionally took time to slow down and just be still? I still remember February 2021. I don't know if you remember this. Just a few years ago, we were living in Dallas, Texas, and it was Valentine's weekend. My parents had come over for the weekend to be with the kids. They wanted to give Alicia and I a little time to kind of get away, and we were grateful for that. But all of our plans changed in what seemed like an instant when what felt like the winter storm of the century rolled in. You guys remember this? It was unbelievable. Our house was about maybe 10 or 15 minutes from the DFW airport, and they recorded over 11 inches of snow in what seemed like, you know, it came like overnight. And all of a sudden, the entire city just shut down. You know, there's snow everywhere, there's ice everywhere, you can't leave your house. All of a sudden, all the kids' activities are canceled, everything gets paused, everything just slows way down. And our kids enjoyed getting out in the snow and playing and, you know, building a snowman and doing all the things that kids love to do in the snow. It was great. And then you begin to realize, okay, there's more going on here, right? People start losing power. Remember how this worked? And our house, it was one of those houses where the power was rolling. So we had power for an hour, and then it was off an hour, on an hour, off an hour. And the good news was that at least, you know, our house was staying warm, but we're all kind of stuck, you know, because you can't really get out and go anywhere. But we had friends close by who didn't have power at all. So now we've got them coming over to stay with us and eat with us and spend the night with us. And all of a sudden, now our house, we've got about 10 people and 2 dogs, and we're all kind of, you know, locked in. We're eating dinner by candlelight. We're playing cards and doing puzzles, because what else are you going to do? Every night is Friday night. We're trying to figure out how to make it through, you know, the snowstorm of the century. And everything just slowed down. Kind of the same thing happened, you know, not too long ago when Hurricane Beryl, you know, moved through. Storm hit, power goes out for a week. You know, we don't have any power, which the problem is we didn't have any internet. That was a real problem, right? So what do? You know, you get done picking up the limbs and branches, and now our whole family, all the kids' activities are canceled. Everything's put on pause, and so we all gather in the living room and play Monopoly for a week. You know, what else are you going to do? Everything just kind of slowed down. Why does it take a snowstorm or a hurricane or some sort of natural disaster in order for us to just slow down? To just slow down. Why are we always in such a hurry? Why is it so hard for us to take time to just be still and be with the people that we love the most? And by the way, when did it become such a good thing to always be in a hurry? Probably even today when you got here to church, you're talking to somebody and they're asking the same old question, how is it going? And you give the same old answer. Oh, it's all good. We're just busy. And when we hear that word busy, you know, busy equals good. Busy equals important. Busy equals status. But what if being busy isn't good? What if it's not good at all? What if it's not good at all? We live in a world where, we're always, it seems like, just running from one thing to the next. We don't have time to stop and have a family dinner anymore, at least our family. It's a struggle, right? Because we're hoping people can just pick up food on the way to whatever's next. And that's just kind of how the world works. And we think that's good. We don't have conversations anymore. Parents are just trading text messages and 2-minute phone calls to make sure we have the bases covered and we're able to get everybody where they've got to be. We're always in a hurry. We're always busy. We're always moving at the speed of light from one thing to the next, just trying to make sure we keep all the plates spinning in the air and everything done that needs to be done. And we think somehow that is good, that it's good to be busy, that it's good to be in a hurry. But what if it's not good? What if it's not good at all? When was the last time you took time just to slow down and be still? I've got good news for us today. There's hope for those of us who are living in this hurried world, and our hope, by the way, has a name. And for those of us, especially those of us in the room today who this time of year, we're leaning into the story. We're leaning into the story of when Jesus came from heaven to earth, when the light of the world stepped down to come and to be with us and to be among us. We're leaning into this story of God coming and becoming one of us. It's a story that we lean into. It's a story of how God himself, who is the light of the world, who moves beyond the speed of light, slowed down to the speed of a baby's crawl. It's the story of the eternal one who sits on a throne high and lifted up, who has stepped down to be with us and among us. This is the story that those of us who call ourselves followers of Jesus are leaning into. And today I want to look at that story again, but I want to look at it through a different lens. I want to look at it through the eyes of Brother John. If you have your Bibles or maybe the YouVersion Bible app, I want to invite you this morning to open to the Gospel of John, chapter 1. And John tells this story in a different way. His gospel, it's different than every other gospel in almost every imaginable way. And his story about the coming of Jesus is different too. Instead of giving us a historical account about a guy named Joseph, a girl named Mary, and this baby born in a town called Bethlehem, John's going to give us a poem. Instead of giving us details about how all of this is going to happen and how all of it's going to unfold, John invites us to imagine the eternal plan of God, the plan that God had in mind from before time began. And he's going to give us a name for Jesus, a name that we probably never would have come up with on our own. Let me share how John starts his gospel. John chapter 1, verse 1. Listen to what Brother John writes. He says, in the beginning, the Word already existed. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. He existed in the beginning with God. God created everything through him, and nothing was created except through him. The Word gave life to everything that was created, and his life brought light to everyone. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness can never extinguish it. So, quick question. Who is this Word? Who is this Word that John is speaking of? Who is this who could simultaneously be distinct from God, yet be the same as God? Who is this who existed from before time began, from before creation, and yet who is the agent of creation? Who is this who is both light and life? You may have heard that the word for word here in John chapter 1, it's a Greek word, the word logos, and you're right. The original language that this gospel was written in is the Greek language, and the word for word here is the word logos, and it carries this idea of divine communication, of reason or order. But John was Jewish. And what you may not know is that the Hebrew word for word is the word Davar. That's the word, the common word that John would have had in mind when he's writing this word Davar, which means word. It was used to signify God's spoken word or command. So the psalmist would say that God speaks, and through his living and active spoken word, everything that was created was created. But the common language for John in his day and time was the Aramaic language. And the word for word in the Aramaic language is the word Memra. And this word, it carries with this idea of the word of God. It's the manifestation of God's communication and expression. It was used to signify God's dynamic presence. This is the word that would have been used in the Aramaic translations called the Targums of the Hebrew Scriptures. The word Memra. So when John calls Jesus the Word, that's a loaded word. John has a lot in mind when he calls Jesus the Word, and it's more than a word. John is saying that this word is a person. He is eternal, he is creative, he is life, and he is light. And his dynamic presence in the world he created is about to change everything forever. So listen to what John writes next in verse 14. Talking about this same word, John says, so this word became human and made his home among us. He was full of unfailing love and faithfulness, and we have seen his glory, the glory of the Father's one and only Son. This word, this eternal word who is life and light, this word that is the manifestation of God's communication and presence. This word was God, this word is God, and this word has now become human. He has become one of us. And not only that, he has made his home among us. In other words, God, think about this, God has stepped down and God has slowed down to be among us. Our God, the God of the universe, the God who is the light of the world and travels beyond the speed of light, has slowed down to a baby's crawl. The eternal one who sits on a throne high and lifted up has stepped down from heaven to earth to be with us. Our God, the God of the universe, this word that has become flesh, has slowed down and stepped down to be among us. Another translation says it this way, John 1:14, the word became flesh. The word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. And there's another word. If you have your scriptures open, you may want to underline that word or highlight that word, or your device, you may want to screenshot that word. This word has made his dwelling among us. That's another word that carries a lot of weight, that carries a lot of meaning. Literally, John, when he's writing this, that word dwell is the word tabernacle. He's saying that this word has come to tabernacle among us. And when you hear that may not mean much to you. But to John's original readers, that carried a lot of weight. They knew exactly what he was talking about because they remembered how their ancestors all those years ago had wandered in the wilderness on their way to the promised land. And every time they would stop their journey, every time they would pause and set up camp, they would set up this tabernacle. It was a tent of meeting. It was a portable temple for God. And every time they would stop their journey and set up camp, they would set up this tabernacle. And when it was set up, do you know what happened? The literal, tangible presence of the living God came in the form of a cloud, and it would come and descend and hover and dwell over that tabernacle. And the people of God knew the Spirit of the living God was with them, was dwelling among them. And do you see what John does? He pulls this idea forward all these years, and he tells his readers, this is happening again, but it's happening in a different way. It's happening in a whole new way. You're not going to believe it, but let me tell you this secret. It's an open secret, but you need to know it. the Word has become flesh. God himself has wrapped himself in human flesh. The author of the story has entered into this story, and now he is here, and he is dwelling among us. He has pitched his tent among us. He has set up camp among us. The literal, tangible, physical, touchable presence of God is here, and he is with us. He has come to dwell with us. To dwell. Think about that. To dwell, if we look at this and we think about what that means, Jesus teaches us to dwell. This is the spiritual practice, isn't it? Of being with and being still. To dwell is the spiritual practice of being with and being still. And Jesus, in a very literal, in a very tangible, in a very real way, has chosen to dwell, to put into practice this being with and being still, slowing down and stepping down to be with and to be among his people. And this right here in John 1, this is John's version of the Christmas story. This is John's version of how it all came to be. That the God of the universe came in the form of a child to step down, to slow down, to be with, to be still, and to be with and to be among his people, to be with and to be among us. My guess is if you haven't done this already, you probably will. And even if you don't, you'll see this. You'll be driving around your neighborhood and you'll see the Christmas lights. And in somebody's front yard, you'll see where someone has set up a nativity scene, a nativity set. My parents, they do this every year. They have this huge nativity set, with the manger and Joseph and the shepherds and Mary and the whole 9 yards, the angel, the star. It's awesome. You may have even gone to one of these. Some places do this. They'll set up a live nativity set, with like real people and a real baby and real animals. And, you can go check it out and go see it and go experience it. They say that the first live nativity set, the idea for that, and the first one that was ever done was done by St. Francis in the year 1223. And what he wanted for his people, he wanted them to experience this reality of God manifesting his presence in a very literal, tangible way. And so he set up this live nativity set for people to come by and to experience what this must have been like all those years ago when God did this, when God came from heaven to earth, when he slowed down and he stepped down to be with and to be still and to be among his people. In a very similar way, that's exactly what John is doing here. John wants his people, he wants his readers, he wants them to understand that this is what God is doing, that this is what God has done, that God has come near, that God has come here to be with and to be among, to be here with his people. And you keep reading in verse 16, and this is what he says next. He says, from his abundance, we have all received one gracious blessing after another. For the law was given through Moses, but God's unfailing love and his faithfulness has come through Jesus Christ. He says, no one has ever seen God, but the unique one, who is himself God, is near to the Father's heart, and he has revealed God to us. So, if you want to see God, John says, take a look at Jesus. If you want to know what God is like, John says, get to know Jesus. If you're wondering if God is near, John says, take a look at Jesus. Jesus is near in a very real way. John says, the God of the universe has slowed down and stepped down to be with, to be near, to be among us. And I don't know if you've ever thought about this. I don't know if you've ever thought about this idea of God slowing down. It's not that God has ever been in a hurry. He's not. God's not stressed out. He's not worried. He's not late. God's not too busy. God is not in a hurry. And that's good news for you and me, because let me tell you this, God has time for you. And he wants to take time to be with you. In fact, if you back up the story all the way to the Garden of Eden, you see this from the very beginning. You know what the heart of God is. You know what the desire of God is. You know what he wants to do? He wants to walk with his people. He wants to walk with you. And God has slowed down. The speed of light, slowing down to the speed of a baby's crawl. So you could know he wants to be with, he wants to walk with you. But he didn't just slow down. God has stepped down. He stepped down from heaven to earth. He has humbled himself to be with you, to be near you. And by the way, his decision to lower himself in this way, he doesn't do this begrudgingly. He's not irritated with you. He's not annoyed with you. He's not frustrated with you. Not at all. Like any parent who gets down to be on the same level with their children. Like a father who gets on the floor to roll around and wrestle and play with his kids. Like a mother who pushes pause on everything she's doing so she can be fully present with her babies. No, God delights in stepping down, in lowering himself, in humbling himself so he can be with you. You know this story. It's a famous story anyway, but I know you know it because you're here today. You're at church. The story of when Joseph and Mary got to Bethlehem and they're looking for a place to stay and they find out there's no room at the inn, right? There's a legend that goes with that story. I don't know if it's true, probably not true, but the legend that goes with the story goes like this, that when Joseph and Mary are over there talking to the innkeeper, there's someone who's nearby who's watching. There's someone nearby who hears this story as it's unfolding. And it's the son of the innkeeper. And he knows what his dad is saying is true. They don't have any room. There's no room in the inn. Every bed is taken. Every place is full. That's true because there's a census and everybody's come here and there's just no room. But the son, his heart is going out to Joseph and Mary. He hears the conversation. He's concerned about the situation. And all of a sudden he hears his father call out and call him over. And so he walks over to his dad, and his dad introduces him to Joseph and Mary, and he says, hey, son, take them over to the stable. Maybe they can stay there tonight. And so the son does. He walks them over, and it's less than perfect, but he does everything within his power to make it as good and as comfortable as he possibly can. And he gets them set up, and then he walks away, but he doesn't go far. He's still concerned about them and concerned about what they're going through. He can see that Mary is great with child, so he kind of stays within earshot. He keeps an eye on the situation. He wants to know if they need anything, he'll be ready to step in and help in whatever way that he can. And as he stands his post that night, he begins to realize this night, it's not like any other night. And this family, they're not just another family. He sees the star above the stable. He hears the babies cry when Jesus is born. He watches as shepherds enter in to worship. And he stands back with a sense of awe and wonder. And he begins to realize this stable that his father owns right here in Bethlehem, it may be the most important place in Bethlehem tonight. No, it may be the most important place in the world tonight because this is the place that the Son of God has chosen to dwell. Now, that story probably isn't true. But what is true is that people just like me and you, we miss opportunities every day to make room for Jesus. What is true is that people just like me and you, get so caught up in the busyness of this life, we miss the opportunity to pause and to stand there with childlike faith in awe and wonder and worship of Jesus Christ. What is true is that Jesus still comes today in humility. He has slowed down and he has stepped down to be still and to be with and to dwell with you. The invisible has become visible. The omnipresent has taken up a location and now has an address. The eternal one has stepped down from the throne of heaven and taken up a place in your heart. And what he desires more than anything is for you to know that grace has a face and hope has a name, and his name is Jesus, and he is the Word who dwells. And the invitation I want to extend to you today, and really for this week and for this season, is simply this. Would you take time to slow down and step down to be with the one who has slowed down and stepped down to be with you? Would you take time to be still and be with the one who has chosen to be still and be with you? What does that look like for you? It can look like a lot of different things. Maybe it's taking your phone and just turning the thing off for 5 minutes and sitting in silence before the Lord. Maybe it's you choosing to open the Word of God and just dwell on his Word. Maybe you want to go take a walk with Jesus. How about that? Maybe take out a piece of paper and write a prayer where you don't ask him for anything. You just thank him for who he is and for all that he has done. The invitation is to take time to dwell with the one who has taken time to dwell with you. What does it mean to dwell? This is the spiritual practice of being with and being still, to be with him, to be still before him, to dwell. And to think about just for a moment, giving up something for the one who has given up everything for you. Church, if you would, let's stand. This morning, we want to close in a time of prayer. I want to invite our shepherds and their wives to just make themselves, if you would, make yourselves available around the room, the front of the room. This may be my most favorite part of every Sunday, when we take time to slow down and step down and be still and pray and usher one another into the presence of the living God. And if you want to do that where you are with someone you're near or on your own, or if you want to come pray with one of our shepherds and their wives, nothing we would love more than to push pause on the busyness of this day and pray for you and pray over you and pray with you. My encouragement to you is simply this, that you would know that this is true. That this, in fact, is not just the Christmas story. This is the good news story. This is the gospel story. The same John who wrote that beautiful poem in John chapter 1, later on in Revelation would write these words. He has this vision of heaven, and in Revelation 21:3, he says this. He says, I heard a loud shout from the throne saying, look, behold, God's home is now among his people. He will live with them, and they will be his people. God himself will be with them. This is the one who has slowed down and stepped down to be with you, to be with us today.